people on the live stream know who's talking. Hello everyone, my name is Diego. I'm the events person at the Urbanist. Firstly, I want to thank the candidates for coming today, as well as our moderator, Crystal Fincher, and also all of you who are watching or in the room with us today. One or two things to go over before I hand it off to the people you actually came to hear from. Bathrooms are back there along the right. We have some water and food. Help yourself at the back of the room. The format today is a little more conversational than you're probably used to hearing at forums. We wanted to hear sort of well thought out, not rushed answers, and because of that, we might not get to all the questions we wanted to ask today, including the Q&A. If you want to try and get a question in on the Q&A, the Urbanist Blue Sky has started, actually probably going to start a new one in a second, but a thread where you can leave your questions, and we'll try and pull from there if we get there and have time at the end of this forum. As a reminder, we have the County Assessor candidates with us here first, Rob Fox-Curran and Chris Roberts. And later we will be having the King County District 2 candidates for their section of the forum. Any questions from the crowd that seem pertinent logistically before I hand it off? Great, thank you for coming and sticking with us, and I'll hand it over to Crystal.
Hello, thank you everybody for being here. Very excited to see you and welcome you online. There is one reminder, since we are having a candidate forum, that I wanted to give everybody about voting this year and hoping that you spread the word. Rules from the United States Post Office have changed, and a postmark is no longer required on the day that you turn in a piece of mail. We are a vote by mail state. People before were used to being able to submit their ballot to the post office on election day before whatever post office closed, and be assured that it would be postmarked and count in the election, because ballots have to be postmarked by election day. This year we'll get our ballots about July 16th and 17th. Election day, the deadline is August 4th. If you are within about a week of that election, drop your ballot in a drop box instead of mailing it. Don't take the chance on the postmark. Please spread that word around. This is a change in the way that a lot of people are used to. That word hasn't spread to a lot of people, so just make sure everybody has a chance to make their own voice heard, make their vote count, and get that in early. That said, I want to welcome both candidates one more time, and we'll get started with the questions. So I'll start with Rob. But asking you both to introduce yourself briefly, think under 2 minutes, and describe how your experience lends itself to this role.
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for hosting us, and thank you. Tech for Taxes and the Urbanist for hosting us as well. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Rob Fox-Curran. I'm running for King County Assessor. How does one become a candidate for the King County Assessor? The shortest line I can draw for people is I currently serve as the Senior Appraiser for the City of Seattle. I've spent my career as a certified general real estate appraiser, predominantly in the state of Washington, but briefly on a national level. And I love being an appraiser. It's work I really enjoy. I find it very intellectually stimulating. And through that process, just out of desire for some public outreach and engagement, I applied to be on the King County Board of Appeals and Equalization, where folks go to appeal their property taxes. They were floored that I applied. It's mostly retirees who are appointed, and I was able to do that right at the same time. Several years ago, I was hired to be the senior appraiser for the city, so I ended up with 2 public sector hats, serving roles I love, and through that process, I became intimately familiar with our assessment practices and processes, and again, out of just intellectual curiosity, I got deep into this world and started developing some strong opinions, and found myself in a place and time where I care deeply about this place. I'm a 5th generation Seattleite. I graduated from Seattle Public Schools before graduating from the UW. And I'm currently raising my daughter with my wife on Beacon Hill. And we care about the affordability of this place and its long-term livability as a region. And if there's something we can do about that, I hope to work on it within this role.
Thank you. I'm Chris Roberts. And for the last 17 years, I've served on the Shoreline City Council, including 4 of those as mayor. I'm a member of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma, and I have a PhD in public law from the University of Washington. I was asked to run for this position by Rod Nabowski. He was concerned because many of his constituents who had been telling him and asking him what's happening with the department People have been applying for their property tax exemption and not hearing anything back. And people would have to wait 12 months, 18 months to learn if their property tax exemption had been approved. And for my house, if I were qualified, I'm not, but for my house, I mean, it would be about a 56% reduction in my property taxes if I had that. And so especially in this moment, but for anyone on a fixed income, that's a huge savings. And we have to do everything we can to keep people in their homes. So I manage, on the city council, I manage public budgets, and I've delivered for the people of the shoreline, from housing to many of the issues that you care about. And I'm very proud of my record on the council. And what I've learned on the council and what I know is that if we want to restore and increase the trust of the community, you have to do the little things right. You have to make sure that from the city level, fill the potholes and provide good customer service to people. And that's the same thing with the Department of Assessments. If we're to build and maintain trust, we have to do the little things right. We have to make sure that we address the understaffing of this department, and we have to just make sure that we do the best job we can to communicate about how our property tax system works in Washington State to the people of all the communities within King County, and we have to help people navigate through the exemption process and through the appeals process.
Thank you. Now, we're going to be asking you to hand that mic back and forth a little quickly because we have a quick little lightning round of some very quick one-word yes or no answers. So first one, what mode of transportation did you use to get to this event?
Light rail.
I walked.
I took bus and light rail. What, do you own or rent the home you live in?
Own.
Own.
Do you own any residential rental properties?
My brother and I just inherited a house from my parents, and so my dad's partner is living there.
No.
Do you own any commercial properties?
No.
No.
Do you own any vacation or second homes?
No.
No.
Who did you vote for or endorse in the prior King County Assessor election?
I endorsed Lloyd Hara when he ran in 2015.
I was never in a position to endorse anyone prior to this. John Wilson was the only name on the ballot the last two election cycles, so that's who I voted for by default.
And did you vote for and endorse Katie Wilson or Bruce Harrell?
I did.
You're in short.
I'm in Shoreline.
I am a shop steward of Pro Tech 17, and on our PAC, we endorsed Katie Wilson very proudly, and I voted for Katie Wilson in both the primary and the general.
And Gurmai Zahalai or Claudia Balducci?
You're mine.
Gurmai.
All right. Now, another general question, done with the lightning round. What do you wish more voters knew about the King County Assessor's Office and its responsibilities?
The one thing I think that I wish people would know is how properties are valued. I think there's a lot of miscommunication about how properties are valued and a lot of misperceptions out there in the community, and I think it's the job of the assessor to correct those misperceptions and be in the community to talk about how the process is done.
Thank you. Honestly, the thing I think most people I wish knew was that the King County Assessor doesn't actually set your tax rate. They assess your property. Their primary role is to value the property. So the most important thing that the assessor can do in any county is have accurate assessments, because accuracy is fairness, is equitable. So that is the primary role.
All right. Many means-tested property tax relief programs, particularly for seniors, people with disabilities, and low-income homeowners, are criticized because the very people they're intended to help often have difficulties enrolling in those programs. Besides just increasing awareness, how will you lower the barriers to enrollment for these programs?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So this is a well-known issue, and frankly, Chris and I have talked about this a lot. I think we're in agreement that it's a pretty serious issue. Approximately only a third of the folks in King County who qualify for the existing circuit breaker programs or property tax exemptions are actually registered for it. So it is a combination of more engaged outreach to the department as well as providing new routes to access it. Actually, very recently, within the last few days, the Skagit County Assessor, Danny Hagan, released an AI tool that he has modeled and utilized in a few smaller counties in the state that he's hoping to expand. And it's just an open public resource that really simplifies the process. So that was a really interesting new tool that just popped up on my radar to help address this issue. But I also know a lot of seniors probably aren't going to engage with that. So it will require utilizing resources at the bureaucratic level beyond just the Department of Assessments, where there are already too few people doing too much work, and embracing other departments' abilities within the county and at the municipal level to help get that word out there to the folks who need it most.
Just a quick follow-up on that. So you mentioned that AI tool. Do you think AI tools can be helpful with issues like that? Do you see yourself using that as an assessor?
Yeah, I will say yeah with caution. Obviously, the advances in AI are changing rapidly, and we need to be extremely careful about how we use those tools, especially in the public sector. So an absolute hedge there. I am very open to the possibility that they could increase efficiency at points, but that would be potentially more in a bureaucratic level. At the end of the day, as far as the Department of Assessments goes, accuracy is the most important thing. Efficiency with AI, less of a significant factor there.
Both questions for you too, Chris.
Sure. This past year, the Washington legislature passed some rules streamlining how the senior property tax exemption is going to be processed. So they raised the threshold for people in King County to qualify to $101,000, and they also created a standard deduction for additional expenses that would always existed, but now, just like your federal income tax return, you can just choose the standard deduction, and that makes it easier for everyone to do the paperwork and for the department to process them. We do expect, or at least I do expect, that the number of people who are going to be applying next year is going to be very high. And so we need to make sure that we have the right staffing there to process all those applications quickly and efficiently. On AI, I do agree with Rob that it is a tool. It is a tool that we have to use that ought to be used with caution, and there needs to be people there evaluating it, and on the back end, that you have to have the human there. You cannot just rely on AI to do anything. And so without humans, it's not a good tool for the governments to use.
Now, the assessor's office has seen a drop in funding over the past few years. Do you think the assessor's office is being funded too much, too little, the right amount? And what would you do to change it?
Well, I do, as I said earlier, I think that the department is understaffed, especially on the customer outreach side. And those are the people who are answering the phones, processing the property tax exemptions forms. That side is, I think, very woefully understaffed. And we need to make sure that we right-size the staff so that we have the resources that are necessary to meet the demands of the public. And it should not take 6 months for someone to process a property tax exemption. That is even too long. So we need to make sure we do it right and we have the right staffing, and I will work with one of the last questions is, we got the questions in advance for everyone, but one of the last questions is, what do you want to prioritize as sort of a legislative, and that is working with the county council to give us the right budget so we can actually do the work for the people of King County.
I agree with largely everything that Chris just said. But yes, I believe the department is underfunded, and it plays a significant role in ensuring that local government functions properly. So this is something that needs to be prioritized significantly. It's not something that can be skimmed. And the department being underfunded, as Chris pointed out, impacts staffing, and when it impacts staffing, that runs up the ladder, and effectively, if we are not able to provide quality customer service to people submitting permits to the assessor's office, that increases the timelines on development of housing, which makes housing more expensive. So these are real problems that can impact the public in many different ways, and ensuring that we are able to, at a minimum, maintain our existing budget, recognizing that forces are going to be pushing up against that in effectively every government bureaucracy in the state these coming years will be a big part of the conversation of, hey, this needs to be a priority to get this done right, to do this job right, to prioritize fair assessment so local municipalities and taxing districts can be provided with the funding that they need via the most fair and equitable process.
Given the 2025 budget cuts and upcoming county budgetary constraints, what ways do you see to improve the governance and administration of the county assessor's office to offset the impact of those cuts?
How do we do more with less? Always the question. And an easy answer would be AI. And as I said before, hedging bets. I think it is worthwhile to explore what it could happen with it, but especially in the public sector, I'm initially hesitant and skeptical to overly embrace it until it's been played out and sort of become a proven quantity in terms of accuracy and fairness. And sorry, I'm getting off topic here. We'll talk about AI more later. But effectively, my interest is being able to prioritize a certain number of things that need to be focused on, including permitting turnaround times, exemption programs, while ensuring that the assessors are able to do the jobs that they have. The amount of time spent on appeals is something that I think could be worked on. They're limited to about 2 hours right now, and if we are able to free up even a couple more hours in the appeals process, I think that a lot of appeals that go to the County Board of Appeals and Equalization could be headed off at the pass and would save, frankly, thousands of public hours of man-hour as well as resources that go into that process. So I think there's some low-hanging fruit that we could work on internally, just some choices that could be made to reprioritize what we're currently focusing our current budget on.
Chris?
Yeah, I think there's certain things that we can do to really make sure that the Department of Assessments can do to make sure that to work with other departments and other agencies well. One of the things I just recently heard, that the city of Seattle is putting some money in some of its levies to force outreach to seniors. And so that part of the levies that the city of Seattle is considering will have that outreach component that the city will use to sort of help promote the property tax exemption programs for seniors, people with disabilities, and veterans. So I mean, that's one thing. We can work with the jurisdiction, with all the jurisdictions in King County, the cities, the school districts, the special purpose, other special purpose districts, and sort of work with them on outreach. Many cities and many these other jurisdictions have newsletters they send to their residents. We can work with them and make sure that we could put the information from the Department of Assessments into some of these newsletters, some of these other emails that are being sent out, so people know what's happening and know that what programs and relief that they're entitled to. So I mean, I think there's ways to work with other jurisdictions to, if there are cuts, because that's not my first thing, but if there are cuts, I mean, really work in, because we've learned in the city of Shoreline that cross-departmental teams make our government work so much better. And so if we can do that, break down the silos and say, this is not just the job of the assessor, this is a job of every government in the county to sort of help us work together, because we are ultimately one King County.
Now, downtown Bellevue and Seattle office towers have high vacancy rates, and valuations of many buildings have been reduced considerably, causing tax rates on other commercial property and residential property to increase. What is the cause of high office vacancy rates?
There's a lot of causes of high vacancy. Do you want me to continue those part of the questions, or?
Let's start with this one, and then we'll get into the other ones.
Sure. I mean, there's multiple causes of high vacancy rates. I mean, certainly decisions by many companies to move away from not just in Seattle and Bellevue, but across the country, to move away from in-person office requirements has certainly played an impact. Is certainly also sort of the spreading out of, within our region, sort of the spreading out of jobs around the region to other regional growth centers outside of downtown Seattle and downtown Bellevue have an impact on how businesses think about locations and space needs. So all of this is impacting vacancy rates, especially in our downtowns.
Yeah, work from home has had a serious impact on the office market specifically, and frankly, there's no way around it. We're seeing office values in downtown Seattle sell for literally less than half of what they did pre-pandemic, and as you pointed out, decreasing property values in downtown Seattle while residential property values are increasing everywhere else in the county shifts that tax burden away from commercial properties to residential properties. And we can get into how you address that next.
Yeah, definitely. Are there reforms you'd advocate for as assessor to help protect residential and commercial property tax rates from fluctuating with the fortunes of downtown and office building valuations? And is this a goal worth pursuing?
Yes, and I want to provide the caveat up front. Per state law, we need to be valuing property based on its fair market value. Because that is fair. And so there is no administrative way to do this legally as it currently stands to say, hey, we want to prioritize residential over commercial properties. That would not hold up in court because it would be against the law. So how you need to address this imbalance is effectively impact state law. And you need to go advocate down in Olympia by embracing the bully pulpit that the King County Assessor's Office provides, being the largest county in the state, to advocate for things like increased circuit breaker programs and exemption programs that would potentially, pending the outcome of things like the millionaire's tax, allow us to value property and assess property non-uniformly and say, hey, you know what, we should provide a universal homestead exemption to people's primary residences. That would require an amendment to the state constitution. Or using a system like the Working Families Tax Credit, we should do what Minnesota does and provide a property value tax credit directly to tenants going around landlords. These are things that exist and programs that exist in other states to help reshift that burden away from residential properties back towards commercial properties. We're not utilizing them here.
Certainly a homestead exemption in Washington state would go a long way. Most other states have a homestead exemption, Washington state does not, and I think that just by doing that, it would really reset and make sure that, and really stabilize what's happening in terms of, for many people, seeing skyrocketing property taxes if they own their home. And that is a good thing. We need to, not this skyrocketing property taxes is a good thing, but going towards a homestead exemption is a good thing. Other states do other things, and actually most states actually have different rates that are assessed on commercial versus residential property. I mean, there's a lot of different models out there across the country and internationally of how each jurisdiction does something differently, and I think there's lots to learn, and I think the state can learn from how other states and other jurisdictions go about levying property taxes.
Now, the Department of Assessments moved some staff out of commercial space and into King Street Station. The move was touted as returning the space back to commercial tax rolls. Do you favor further reduction of Department of Assessments' use of commercial space?
Well, I'm not the assessor currently, but one of the things that I would do is work with the unions to figure out what resources and what space they need, and learn from them and work with them to determine what exactly the space needs that the department needs.
I agree. We deal with this, I work in the real estate and planning services team at the city of Seattle currently. We deal directly with this issue all the time. And while surface level, yes, it makes sense to consolidate space and save the county money in terms of rent when and where you can. The reality is different teams have different needs. And in the role of the Department of Assessments, I know there have been satellite offices in the past that provide customer service to areas of the county that are not easily accessed by public transit to downtown Seattle. So there are instances where satellite offices make sense. But yeah, it's case by case basis, and if and when you can do it, it should be done, but there are always exceptions to that rule.
Now, property tax is a budget-based system, meaning the tax dollars needed will be collected regardless of assessment values. Do you favor limiting the tax burden shift from increased exemptions like the senior exemption, or from decreasing commercial values, which would shift those tax dollars over to residential taxpayers? Starting with Rob.
Could you answer that one more time?
Yep. Property tax is a budget-based system, meaning the tax dollars needed will be collected regardless of assessment values. Do you favor limiting the tax burden shift from increased exemptions like the senior exemption, or from decreasing commercial values, which would shift those tax dollars over to residential taxpayers?
So the question, as I understand it, is how do you favor rebalancing?
Right.
Yes, okay. I am in favor of rebalancing, and the reality is the current system as it stands provides us pretty limited tools to do that. We have limited circuit breaker programs in this state. These are the exemptions that we keep referring to, largely for seniors, veterans, and our neighbors with disabilities. And those are good programs, and it's good news that they've expanded this year. Frankly, as we talked about, we need to get people signed up for those, because those are ways to keep people in their homes and ways to keep people housed. But again, we have limited tools currently that this office can utilize to do that without advocacy at the state level to change state law.
And I think that, as we mentioned earlier, many of the bigger changes probably will need changes to the state constitution, more than just changes to state law. The assessor needs to appraise all properties fairly and uniformly. That's first. And then we use the best methods for determining that is through comparable property sales. And then we don't have comparable property sales, then there's the cost approach method of appraising, and then there's the income approach of appraising, especially for commercial properties. And so I believe it's important that we make sure that we use the correct valuation methods and use the right valuation method for each classification of properties. And so we want to make sure that everyone is paying the right amount. And we have to use to the best of our abilities the current tools that the assessor has. And then I think the lower hanging fruit is sort of expansion of exemption programs, which have been constitutionally permissible in the state.
Now, Washington State, as you guys both talked about, requires uniform taxation across a class of property. Do you support state legislative efforts to allow municipalities to define land and improvements of buildings on the land as separate taxable classes, enabling a split rate property tax? And can you talk about the benefits and risks there are to maintaining different levies for different zone uses, such as industrial versus residential?
So I'm not in favor of changing the uniformity clause. I think my sense is that the Supreme Court is going to make a decision on the income tax, the millionaire's tax, that is not going to address uniformity. I know there's some efforts, and some people sort of say, well, let's just get rid of the uniformity clause. The challenge, if we get rid of the uniformity clause, then we might have jurisdictions saying that we want to give property tax breaks to certain types of industries, such as let's build a new sports stadium, or we want to give property tax exemption to a large aerospace manufacturer, or something like that. And so what we have in the uniformity clause prevents cities and prevents the state from sort of using the property tax as in a way that sort of drives businesses away, or gives away public resources to particular businesses. So the uniformity clause in many ways is a really good thing, although I think both of us recognize that there are some challenges with how the uniformity clause affects residential property owners.
Rob?
Yeah, you'll find that Chris and I actually agree on a lot of this. Exactly as Chris said, the uniformity clause serves a purpose, and it really is valuable in a lot of senses that it exists in some form. And so the methodology here needs to be specific carve-outs effectively at the state level of identifying specific uses that we feel should be potentially prioritized over others, but that can be a slippery slope. So it needs to be really specific, targeted, a very specific targeted process to withstand legal challenges and also ensure that the system actually remains fair. The first part of your question was about split rate taxation. Split rate taxation, correct me if I'm wrong in this, but is another way to refer to the land value tax. Is that correct?
I think that was the intention of this question.
There we go. So, land value tax, I'm going to assume the Venn diagram of people who attend this event and read the Urbanist are very familiar with the land value tax as a concept.
Explain it again. Explain it again.
Okay. Henry George, 19th century economist. Georgism as a philosophy and economic philosophy. He believed that the majority of value should be placed in the taxation process on land and not the improved structure on that land. Why is that? Because inherently, the land itself is the finite and valuable resource. The improvements that you build upon it, maybe they can be income generating, maybe you develop them to your highest and best use, but that's varying. What is finite is the land itself. And so the idea is effectively to place a significant portion of the assessed value on land value and reduce the amount that is placed on the improved value. And some benefits of this would be to say, encourage development of highest and best use on lots that are currently being underutilized, so encouraging development of things like houses and things of that nature.
Now, in conversations with city and county council members, what policies would you lobby for to reduce real estate speculation in King County and force vacant and underutilized landowners to develop housing?
A land value tax or a split rate tax would work great for that purpose. So I will be blunt, I was actually just talking to Eastside Urbanist about this the other week. I see a universal homestead exemption coming through as sort of our specific doorway to reaching a land value tax. Of being able to say, hey, we can and are legally able to prioritize residential property over commercial property. As Chris pointed out, this is handled in different ways throughout taxing jurisdictions all across the country. And I think first getting the universal homestead exemption here opens the door for us to move in the direction of a land value tax in the state of Washington.
Chris?
Well, I know that Spokane has officially adopted the position of moving towards a land value tax. And I think there's a lot of interesting things that moving towards a land value tax can do. And certainly a land value tax really, what it does is it makes those people who own undeveloped or underdeveloped land, that they are now being charged, that they would now be sort of they would not get a benefit for not developing their land. And if someone has to pay, I mean, let's just say $30,000 for a particular parcel, and if it's just land, but they're paying hundreds of thousands of dollars if it was developed, those people are just holding on and they're speculating on that land, and the state doesn't really, without a land value tax, the state doesn't, is sort of, okay, it's fine, you can just keep holding this property until you want to do something with it. But if someone is being charged 3, 4, 5, I mean, who knows how many more times more, then they would actually be motivated, or more motivated, to actually develop that property. There are some challenges in terms of implementation of the land value tax that need to be worked out, and I want to work with Sightline and others who are really interested in this issue to understand how a land value tax can be implemented and implemented successfully in Washington State.
Quick answers for this one, the beginning of it. Do you believe land value in King County is undervalued, fairly valued, or overvalued?
Overall, I think we're fairly valued.
Agree. Overall, we're fairly valued.
So what investments would you make, or what methodologies would you update to maintain our accuracy of values?
Ratio studies are the process in which the State Department of Revenue determines the accuracy of the individual Department of Assessments in each county. So ratio studies are key to ensuring accuracy and fairness in the process, and you go through a number of those in any given year and in any given evaluation cycle. So achieving high scores in your ratio studies is how you prove to the public that you are doing well. And then also I think it's important to actually make it so people receive that information and make that information easy to digest and understand, which is currently not the case. And so yeah, that is my answer.
Chris?
I think one of the things that I think we need to do and take a strong look at is make sure that we're using the correct methodology of this appraisal for each classification of properties. So we have to make sure we have to do the best we can, and when we're talking about sort of our scores, we're looking at about 90% accuracy, and that's the goal. We're never going to get to 100% accuracy because we know that things change. Like the house that sold next to me had lots of work to do, and so it was sold for under what its appraisal would be, and so that's why you have sort of this. You're looking at 90%, but for commercial, especially for commercial property, you have to really look and make sure you're using the right methodology to capture the fairness of how we're appraising a particular parcel.
Under the current system, a vacant lot in a high-value neighborhood pays lower taxes than an adjacent developed parcel because the combined assessed value is lower. Do you see this as a problem? And if so, what tools does the assessor currently have to address it? Chris?
Well, I think the only way to get there is for the state to decide to move to a land value tax. And until then, we have to use the correct methodology, and that is looking at comparable sales of that particular parcel. So if it is a parking lot, you're looking at comparable sales of similar parking lots in downtown areas. That is what we have to do, and if not that, then we're looking at sort of what the income generation of that parking lot might be, a surface parking lot. But until we have a land value tax or some other system, you're going to have to use the methodologies and the approaches that the state allows, and that is largely comparable sales and then cost approach methods and income-based methods of appraisals.
Rob?
Per state law, we assess the fee simple value, so the unencumbered ownership rights of the value on every single property. And you do that by determining the property's highest and best use, which is when it's physically possible, legally permissible, maximally productive, and financially feasible. So effectively, what needs to happen in that process, and this gets challenging and difficult when you're using Canvas software, computer assisted mass appraisal software. It works differently than if you are valuing an individual property. You can look at it in detail and say, hey, this lot is X size, and therefore we can develop this number of units on it, or residential properties. It gets fairly complex, and one of the issues with CAMA is it has a hard time taking into account individual instances. And I think we're going in this direction, but utilizing things like new GIS techniques will help to ensure that you're able to catch individual properties that are sort of benefiting from the status quo in this process, and make sure the properties are being properly assessed at their true highest and best use and not skirting it because they are a unique size and have been writing that for years and it's gone unnoticed.
Would you support implementing a tax or fee on vacant storefronts, residences, and/or lots? And if so, should it be implemented through the assessor's office, and how would you approach implementing it? Rob?
I've gone back and forth on this. I don't know if taxing vacant storefronts on properties that are currently losing money is an effective way to fill those spaces. That said, obviously we do need to be creating new revenues for income, and frankly, I say this as somebody who comes from the commercial real estate industry. They've got the money to give, they've got the money to spare, so there is room there. But I don't know if taxing vacant storefronts is necessarily the way to go in that regard.
Chris?
Similar to Rob, I don't think it's necessarily the way to go. And if that was, I mean, if the legislature decided to move, or a city decided to move that way, I don't think it's the role of the assessor to actually collect that. The assessor has enough on its plate, and to try to figure out how long a storefront is vacant, or it would just be so much administrative work. And we already talked about how the budget of the King County Assessor is not what it needs to be. To try to add something this complex would have to be collected by someone else.
Do you think any types of land are overvalued or undervalued?
I think that there are different types of properties that are, in general, undervalued. I think golf courses as one, I think private golf courses are generally undervalued. I think that when you get to the extremes, so there's properties that are very unique, or residential properties that are, the really Bill Gates' house and Paul Allen's house, those type of properties, they're very hard to figure out what the true value is. And so you have times when some of those unique properties are going to be appraised, so even sometimes millions of dollars higher than what what they might be sold for. And we've seen that in King County. That happens. Similarly it's a little bit easier sort of on the lower end. There's still some times where you have properties that are residential properties or commercial properties or industrial properties where you're overvaluing them. So it happens, and that's just the goal of the Department of Assessments is to be fair and as accurate as possible.
Rob?
Yeah, as Chris pointed out, golf courses are famously undervalued, and it is a remarkably unfair process, and I think we'll get into that more further. But yeah, it does happen where certain properties are over-assessed or under-assessed, as Chris pointed out. The more unique a property, the more likely there is to be variance in its market value relative to its assessed value, because they can be tricky. Data centers are a hot topic right now for obvious reasons. Data center valuation is super unique. It involves the amount of power and effectively natural resources that you can bring to make that facility accessible and possible. And where they can actually be located is unique, and so all of a sudden, if a site could host a data center, it becomes remarkably more valuable. And I think a lot of public jurisdictions are catching up to things like that, just as we're sort of seeing them develop in the market. But that said, this is also why the appeals process exists, because there are inaccuracies. Again, the way the CAML software system works, and the 6-year cycle of assessment works in our counties, is open to the possibility that there are some facts about certain properties that the assessor's office is unaware of, and that's when you engage in the appeals process to correct that.
Now, I'm adding a question in here because we did just talk about that. Unique properties, high value properties. We're an area of comparatively extraordinary wealth. So what will your approach be to accurately value those properties, which we may have more of than a lot of other areas?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. When they get unique, And specifically for income-producing properties, you utilize the income approach. I can tell you in my time on the Board of Appeals and Equalization, this is where the consultants and lawyers get paid to make a difference. Sales comparison approach, frankly, the assessor does a great job with that. The average home in this county is pretty damn accurately assessed. The average home, of course there are exceptions to that rule. But when you get to a high value commercial property, boy, can consultants come in and say, you know, you guys utilize this income stream, but we're actually collecting this income stream, and here's the evidence for it, and that means this property is worth millions less than you think it is, and they get their tax burden reduced, again, shifting that tax burden over to everyone else, making livability and increasing the cost of just living here for most people. So ultimately, having knowledgeable, well-trained appraisers who are able to spend the necessary amount of time and be given the proper training and tools to do their job effectively is the key to reaching accurate assessments and therefore fair assessments.
Chris?
I'll first start by, the appraisers in the department are award-winning, and they are doing a very good job. And we see that in a number of ways. The relatively few number of appeals we have in King County is a testament to the really great work that they are doing. It's a large raw number, which has some problems because the process time it takes for an appeal to be adjudicated is really long, and we need to fix that. But in general, the department does a very good job. One of the things that we have, the tools that are available for trying to figure out sort of some of these unique properties is we're not limited to look within King County or even Washington State to figure out comparable sales. If there are comparable properties, there's only one. If it's something really unique, you may look at in Los Angeles, you may look in Miami to figure out, okay, what is a comparable property? How much was that sale sold for? And then similarly, when you're looking at income-based or approaches to figuring out how much revenue a particular commercial property might gain or be collecting, ideally you want the property owners can tell you how much they're actually collecting, but if that's not the case, you can look at industry averages and try to figure out, okay, a similar commercial building is getting this type of revenue, we're going to apply that. And again, I think that's how you get to sort of the best practices and get everything right.
Now, we are going to talk about some golf courses. Washington Administrative Code requires property to be valued at its highest and best use, considering all uses that could reasonably be applied. Private golf courses in Seattle sit on land zoned single family, adjacent to parcels valued orders of magnitude higher per square foot. They're valued at approximately 1/15 of public golf courses and about 1/200 of single family parcels nearby. Why is the highest and best use valuation for a golf course a golf course?
I think there's two different types. Within private golf courses, there's sort of two different types of golf courses. One, and I think the ones that are really from, as a public official, I get upset with this. The fact that if there's a deed restriction on a golf course, then one of the things about highest and best use is about legally permissible. And if there is a deed restriction, that deed is similar to any kind of citywide zoning law. And so the departments have to respect that limitation on that deed, because the deed goes with the property and not with the person. And so the property owner can't just build high-rises on some private golf courses that are restricted to just be a golf course. It is unfortunate, but if the legislature were to try to change that, there'd be a lot of lawsuits on that. And so what we have to do is make sure we use the right methodology to appraise the golf courses fairly. The King County Assessor is using a cost approach method, which sort of depreciates assets instead of using the income-based approach for the golf courses. And I think, again, I'm really stressing that we have to make sure we use the right methodology for each classification of property.
Rob?
I'm actually going to go back one question. To Chris's point on being able to use comps from out of state in the sales comparison approach, I was laughing during it. I agree with everything Chris said. I once was appraising a really unique brand new cold storage facility in Anchorage, Alaska. And shocker, there were no other similar cold storage facilities in Alaska. So all of my comps were from Whatcom County. So that does happen. But that said, relative to golf courses and their valuation, the current assessor would point you to the report that their office did back in 2024, indicating that the way they currently value golf courses is correct. And as somebody who has professionally valued golf courses, I can tell you, by best practices, they are doing the process correctly as it stands, given the current legal lay of the land. They are utilizing best practices for appraisal practice. The reason we do not use the income approach in that process is because there is effectively no reliable market data to lean on in that income approach. As well as the sales comparison approach, the sales of golf courses, the data variance is so significant that it wouldn't hold up in court if you were to value a golf course utilizing those methodologies, which is why they have to use the cost approach. That's not a happy answer, which is why this needs to be addressed at the state level. And those conversations are ongoing, and there is a solution to this, and again, it lies at the state of creating, again, a very unique carve-out here, identifying, hey, everybody recognizes this is unfair except for private golf course users and owners. We are effectively subsidizing private golf courses through this process. This is worthy of a carve-out in state law to say this should not be permitted as it currently is, and it needs to be assessed utilizing its highest and best use, which under all other circumstances would be the same value as residential property adjacent to it.
So you both agree that we're incorrectly assessing private golf courses right now. Why should voters trust that you'll correct a valuation error that your predecessors have ignored for years? Rob?
Because I've cared about this issue for a decade, longer. A buddy of mine, local urban planner who I grew up with, made a PowerPoint presentation about this in like 2015. This has been a needle in my craw for a long time. I grew up just outside of the walls of the Sandpoint Country Club. I guess, believe me when I say, this is personal. And it really does piss me off. And I understand the way to address this is not an internal administrative tweak. It is aggressive advocacy to address this policy at the state level. And I think this is one of these things that could be pretty popular. Yeah, that's how I plan to go about it.
Chris?
I think that the report on golf courses is just sort of just one thing that the assessor is doing that I think is not doing well in terms of how they're communicating with the public and how they're appraising properties. There are a number of properties in King County. The Sheridan Beach Golf Club, Sheridan Beach Club in Lake Forest Park is seen by the assessor as a nonprofit organization, but is only serving a handful of individuals who happen to be members of that organization. And so they're paying for lakefront property on Lake Washington, they are paying zero in property taxes. That is something that needs to be addressed. So we need to aggressively look at all the properties and all of these nonprofits to make sure that they're actually fulfilling the goals of state law. And that's within the scope of what the assessor can do. So there's just these small things that we can do, that the assessor can do to actually make things just a little bit fairer. This isn't going, all of these things, whether whether golf courses are appraised either slightly or sort of if the state does something more aggressively, it's not going to change someone's property taxes that much. at the end of the day. Where the total assessed value in King County is approaching $1 trillion. And so these are just small things, but if we do things right, if we restore the trust of the people have in King County by doing these small things correctly, I think we're gonna go a long way in building a system that people really trust and really respect.
Kind of a quick answer here. Why are golf courses valued significantly lower than yacht clubs or tennis clubs? Chris?
I think a large part is because yacht clubs and tennis clubs are much smaller in terms of their footprint. So yacht clubs are going to be on the water, and don't need a very large footprint. And so they're collecting a lot of revenue from the small footprint they have. Similar with tennis clubs, golf courses are relatively large, whether it's 9-hole or 18-hole golf course. I mean, there's a lot of space that's being used. And so per hole, or however you sort of calculate how much revenue that's coming in for that, it's just not a lot of revenue per acre that's coming in for the golf courses compared to a yacht club where you might have docks and you're renting out slips and things like that. So these things, it's just a matter of size.
Rob?
Yeah, it's funny. I have always avoided appraising mortgage because I find it a nightmare of a process. But a good buddy of mine, former coworker, is one of the local experts on valuing things like yacht clubs and mortgage rights. And there's actually pretty excellent market data on it. And that's one of the reasons why we are able to measure the income streams from those and more, frankly, fairly and accurately value them. Golf courses are unique in their characteristics. And again, just the way the system currently works legally, having a deed restriction in place that says, hey, this golf course can only be utilized as a golf course, the way our system currently works means that it inherently has dramatically less value because it cannot be developed with anything other than a golf course use. Thus, if you were to measure that, it dramatically decreases the value. Is it fair again? No. Is it the way the system currently works? Yes. Is it right? No.
Do you support King County using eminent domain to purchase private golf courses at the assessed value so that we can convert them to higher utilization parks or housing? Rob?
I think it's a clever idea. And it does put a smile on my face, but at the end of the day, no, I don't think, I think it becomes unfair in a very backwards way for its own reasons and could set a negative precedent in terms of how the government treats individual property. Not that these individuals need the government's help, but there are ways that we can address this, and I think we should be addressing it in a more legally sound way than maybe forcing the issue there.
Chris?
Eminent domain is something that in the city of Shoreline we use with very judiciously. We don't generally like to use eminent domain, but sometimes you have to, and I will defer to the wisdom of the county council if they wanted to go that direction.
So you would support others supporting it?
I will let others support it, yes.
Okay. Why are large single home residential lots in Seattle that can easily be subdivided valued significantly less per square foot of land than nearby parcels?
So some of this is just how much, the nature of the individual property and how much excess space can be used. So I'll use a shoreline example because I'm more familiar with shoreline examples, but if you have a 7,500 square foot lot and you could, and the minimum lot size would be 7,500 square feet, and if you had an 8,500 square foot lot, you can't actually sell or subdivide that excess portion, at least as an individual homeowner. And so most people, when they purchase a land, they recognize the square foot, how many square feet your property might be, but you're not going to really quibble whether it's, in my case, I wasn't quibbling when I purchased my house, whether it was 8,000 square feet or 10,000 square feet. So there's no extra premium for those extra square feet, not necessarily an extra premium for the square foot of property. compared to how much I could actually build on or use. I was more concerned as a property owner how many square feet my physical house was versus the square feet of the land. So if you're trying to subdivide, then you have to sort of think about other ways, if you are able to subdivide, you have to sort of think about how feasible is it to actually subdivide that property. Are there easements that can have to be made to get to a back lot? If you have a very long property that goes back quite far, you may have to have an easement, and so some of that land now has to be protected as an easement, and so you're not actually getting any extra value from that subdivision. So all of this is to say that if you have a compact lot, you're going to get a premium per square foot. It's going to be appraised at a premium per square foot compared to a slightly larger lot. Now, certainly when you get to different scales, that calculus changes, but to the extent of how many viable lots you have within that property.
Rob?
Yes. So the concept is excess versus surplus land. Excess land is land that is on your existing property that could be developed for another use, subdivided, things of that nature. Surplus is, hey, that's great that you have extra square footage on your lot, there's nothing you can do with it. And it's valued and treated differently in the valuation process. I will say this, as the proud owner of 3,990 square foot lot, a few blocks south of here, I can tell you that there is not an inch of surplus land or excess land on my lot due to setbacks and things of that nature. And so frankly, just zoning and development code play a large role in this of how it impacts individual properties from municipality to municipality. Yeah.
So as the wealth gap increases in the region, larger homes are being built with larger carbon footprints. Would you support a tiered property tax rate based on increased carbon footprints, shifting the property tax burden slightly towards the wealthy from lower priced homes?
I think, in theory, I'm in favor of this idea. I will be honest, I don't know if it is the place of the Department of Assessments to directly be involved in the management of that process, but I'm open to learning more about it and advocating on behalf of it, because I think that would be another progressive revenue stream that we could develop locally that would frankly pair nicely with our values locally. Yeah.
So quick, I just want to clarify. So are you open to learning more about it, or is it something you would support?
I think I want to support it. I also don't think in the purview of the Department of Assessments, it's something I would have immediate control over.
Chris?
I'd be open to learning about it. In large part that there's a siren going.
Siren going by, and it's pretty loud. We'll wait for that to pass real quick. Hopefully everybody is okay wherever that ambulance is on the way to.
So one of the things, if you have, there are multiple different taxes that people pay, and one of those is a utility tax. And so presumably people with larger homes have a larger electric bills, just in terms of, even if you have an efficient heat pump, or you're probably going to be into paying more for electricity. So I mean, I believe some of that's already captured, but this is the first time I've heard about this concept, so I'm not going to commit to anything there.
All right, so we're at our closing question with these pre-selected questions that we have. So, starting with you, Chris, what would be the one of the top priority pieces of legislation you would advocate for the county council to pass and the state legislature to pass?
So as I said before, I think the first thing that I would advocate for is for the correct budget for this department. That is the most important thing, and if we do things right, if we provide good customer service for the people of King County, people are going to have trust in what we're doing. We can do the work to actually make sure that people understand how properties are being appraised. We've talked about the CAMA system, which is largely a multivariate regression if you're a math person, using lots of different factors. So, but we need to be able to explain how properties are being valued in a way that most people can understand. It shouldn't be appraisers talking to appraisers in what is on the department's website. We need to make sure that we boil it down so the people in King County can understand how the properties are being valued. And then on the legislative side, the homestead exemption is the thing that we need to work on. The Pierce County and Snohomish County assessors have been pushing for that, and the King County needs to lend its voice and lend a credible voice to Olympia and say this is something that we need and we needed yesterday.
Rob?
Shocker, once again, Chris and I are pretty aligned on this. Defending the department's budget is key in this process, and being able to ensure that the Department of Assessments is able to do its job and do its job well, again, is just nuts and bolts good local governance. In addition to that, there are some other things that I think, Chris was speaking earlier about breaking down silos at the county level. I've been advocating for something that exists, again, in other states, the option for monthly payments, which would really help people on fixed incomes to avoid paying massive lump sum payments a year in property taxes. That is something that is beyond the immediate control of the Department of Assessments and would need to be worked out with the Treasurer's Office internally at the county, and working with the County Council and the Treasurer's Office are ways to open up things like getting to monthly payments. Snohomish County actually has them, but they utilize a different process that effectively charges people interest, which is something I would like to avoid. At the state level, as Chris pointed out, yes, the homestead exemption should be the #1 priority, and again, that comes with a state amendment that it needs to be paired with, as well as I addressed this in an article, an op-ed I wrote for the Urbanist. It's a 3-part system to make sure we are not leaving out renters from that process, because renters pay property taxes too via their rent. We need to ensure that they're included in that process, treat that homestead package with the constitutional amendment and the renter's credit as one package that needs to be pushed through the legislature together to ensure that all residential property types are treated equally and fairly in that process.
Now, I'm going to hand it over to Diego. We have some time for audience questions if we have some.
Okay, great, this is working. I'm going to have folks who want to ask some audience questions actually come over and line up sort of by me, if you can. I also want to add, GotGreen was one of the other co-hosts and got their questions to us relatively late. So I'm going to dictate the first question from GotGreen as our first sort of audience Q&A, and then we'll have the audience sort of file in after that, and we should have time for a handful of questions. From GotGreen, residents of South Seattle face higher rates of exposure to environmental hazards such as freeway exhaust and increased temperatures due to the relative lack of green spaces. Where many light rail cars are subterranean in neighborhoods north of Madison Street in Seattle, they run above ground in areas like Othello. What does environmental justice mean to you, candidates, in 2026? And what, if at all, is the King County Assessor's role in advancing environmental justice?
Rob?
Great question, and also thank you. I left them out of my original thank you for those planning this. So thank you if you are tuning in now. So I say this as somebody who lives on Beacon Hill and who every 30 seconds has to raise his voice to hear what my neighbor is saying to me over the fence as planes fly overhead while we are within a mile of the I-5 and I-90 interchange, and also adjacent to Boeing Field. Despite being under the SeaTac flight path. It's real, and I have concerns as a parent raising my daughters in this environment due to legitimate environmental concerns, and it's kind of accounted for in the assessment process around land values and values of properties in that sense. But there is a way, I think, to measure this that is not being considered. And we take into account things like environmentally critical areas in assessment value. And that's something that can be provable and identifiable and will reduce the assessed value of a property due to its limitation. I think it's worth the thought and effort to consider this specific topic in regards to assessment and valuation. To take into account and recognize, hey, these areas are significantly more negatively impacted by environmental factors than other areas. We can measure that, and I think that's worth executing on that process to determine what that would look like, how to measure that, and then see if it can be implemented.
Chris?
Many of the marginalized communities in Seattle, King County, and across the nation have been burdened by environmental injustice since, well, ever since cities started being developed. And this is a problem, and we have to all recognize and address. I think one of the things looking to what the assessor can do is the state does have open space programs, property tax exemption programs that I think we can expand, and we can really, with legislative help, I think we can expand these programs to make sure that we provide this exemption, which largely goes to preserving watersheds outside of the core of Seattle. But I think we can sort of use this program, use the idea of these programs to help communities within the urban areas to really say that if you have a stream or if you have some sort of environmental protected land that you are protecting on your property, we should be able to use that to preserve and protect the natural environment that we have within the urban core. And we have this program, we just have to figure out how we can apply it to places outside of farmlands and forest lands in King County.
Great, we'll be moving on to the first of the Q&A questions.
Hi. Rob, you've talked a lot about the homestead exemption. I'm curious, Chris, what are your thoughts, and can you explain it while you're at it, and what it is, and who it would impact most, and how it would change the taxing structure? I know it's not legal yet.
A universal homestead exemption would say that the first, a percentage of your property would be exempt from how the taxes are appraised. So if you have a $800,000 home, or let's use $1 million home, this is a little bit easier math. You can say that 100,000 of that is going to, that first 100,000, the first 200,000, the first 300,000, the higher you go, the more you have a shift. But that first 100,000 would be exempt from taxation. So instead of being appraised or having the tax rate applied to that $1 million, you would now be at 900,000 or 800,000, depending on what the legislature chooses. And so this is a break for homeowners, people living in their homes. It is relatively progressive because it would be $100,000 for the Bill Gateses, but also 100,000 and that, I don't even know what his property is appraised at, but it would be 100,000 there, but also for my home, which is appraised at 750,000, that would be 100,000 for me. So I mean, that would be a bigger break for me than it would for someone who has a multi-million-dollar home.
So two questions to that sort of tie in together. Sorry. No. Okay. For this universal homestead proposal, I guess first off, since the appraiser's work needs to basically raise enough revenue to cover its chunk of the budget, how does this universal homestead exemption actually lower individuals, or is it just like a minor shift over to folks who have second homes and stuff in the area? And then second, just given how regressive Washington State's property tax structure is, tax structure overall, and the property tax being one of the most progressive taxes that we have, and personally thinking about it, taking the example of a $1 million home, that at the state taxes at least, that homeowner would be liable for about $8,000 in state property taxes. Just thinking in comparison, my annual rent is like almost twice that at this point, and I'm not sitting on $1 million asset. So I guess I just wonder why the state should prioritize a non-targeted tax cut for homeowners through the homestead exemption. Thank you.
It's a great question, and I appreciate the thought that you put into it, and I think it's completely fair. Honestly, you said a few things that intrigued me there. I really appreciate the question, but I will try and stay focused on the question at hand. Yes, to your point, A universal homestead exemption would provide individuals primary residence that they own with a tax exemption. That, of course, benefits homeowners. It does not benefit people in apartments who rent their houses. And thus, the advocacy I mentioned earlier for the three-part process at the state level to ensure that we include renters in that process. Again, we have the working family tax credit in the state, and a lot of this administratively, this is looking behind the curtain a little bit. One of the reasons why this legislation actually hasn't passed up to this point is a debate about what level of administration should be handling this process. Should it be at the county level or the state level? Shocker, I'm sure Chris and I both agree it should be handled at the state level. And I think there are good reasons for that. But effectively utilizing the same system that the working family tax credit does, you could, again, mirror Minnesota's system and provide a renter's tax credit via direct payments to income qualifying tenants. I will say, if you do the math for the average renter, we're talking something like $300, which is significantly less, to your point, than the savings that an individual homeowner would get. This opens the door to expansion. We have nothing on the books currently. The idea is getting us to move in the right direction. Frankly, a property tax, if it's executed perfectly, is a neutral tax. I wouldn't say it's necessarily regressive or progressive. We have managed to make it regressive in this state, because of course we have. 100 years of deciding that we're really dug in on our policies has led to our current situation. Thus, there is a lot of popular agreement on the need for this at the state level, and I think it can and will happen with the right advocacy and pushing. But I'll go to Minnesota again, the gold standard. Renters who were income qualified for their tax credit this last year got $2,600. That's really meaningful money. So would we be able to get there right out of the gate in this state? No. But my hope long term is to move in that direction because that's fair.
I would say, I agree with Rob on this. Fundamentally, we have, in Washington State, our legislature has not really had a fundamental rethinking of how our tax structure works in general terms. So what would the property tax exemption programs, the homestead exemption, all of these things are largely band-aids because our legislator has not actually done the work to figure out how we have a tax system that really works for the people of Washington State. We went to Costco today and was paying 10.5% sales tax. The city of Shoreline is looking at another 0.1% increase for mental health support, and that the state passed and gave the cities tools to. The county is considering if the county does it, it will apply to everyone in the county. If the city does it, then we can keep that money locally within the city. And so that's not the best way to run our government, is making everything worse. Sales taxes are inherently regressive. They're the worst type of taxes. And so we need to fundamentally rethink how our system works. How do we provide a safety net for the people of Washington State? That's what we need to do, is do the hard work and actually do that to build the tax system that works for everyone. I will admit, these are just band-aids that we're talking about. We need the do that real work to get to where we want to be.
Hello. Hi, I'm Ben, and I live in Capitol Hill. I'm a renter, and one question I have for you guys is specifically about how we tax parking lots. So I live just on the cross street between Madison and 18th, and so right in front of me in my apartment that I look out into is a parking lot for CenturyLink, which is a privately owned, no one can get into it. But when I look to the other side of the street, there's a church with attached parking lot on their parcel, and then two other parcels of land that are both categorized in the King County parcel website as being only for parking. But they're non-exempt, and for the entirety of their week, they're operated by Diamond Parking Lots, which is a private company. And so my question to you is, should a parcel of land that is being operated by a private company 6.5 days of the week, so basically just not during church service on Sunday, be tax exempt instead of being taxed like a normal, parking lot?
and this is a complicated question, and there's a lot of different layers to that, because there is not an easy answer, and what the department does is unique among any type of government. I mean, on one level, you're assessing properties across the whole county in a very mass appraisal system. So you're not looking at each individual property to figure it but you have to look at the individual property to understand how it's being used. And so I think what the assessor needs to do is, just like with some of the nonprofits who may not be nonprofits, I mean, really take a quick look at all these properties and say, okay, if we have the budget to do this, to really look at these properties and make sure that they are classified properly. And that's what we can do to make sure, because I agree, it's maddening and it doesn't make sense.
Parking lots in urban areas, right? This is frankly a complex valuation question, but I really appreciate the thought that you put into it. So 2 different issues here. Parking lot that is not tax exempt, generating parking revenue. It's probably assessed under its highest and best use, which is not a parking lot collecting income. So we call that land banking, which we were talking about earlier, holding property for future development potential. And in the meantime, it serves as a surface parking lot, generating revenue to help cover costs and pay things like taxes. And that's how that parking lot is probably assessed. For paid parking that generates revenue 6 days a week on a property exempt from taxation like a church, they would actually be paying taxes on the income derived from those parcels not related to their church use.
Okay, I didn't know, and that's not on the King County Assessor website, or like it would be on like the Treasury website? Like, how would you figure out?
A portion of the property's value is exempt from taxation.
Okay.
They go through the process to determine the income stream that is being generated from that outside entity, and they do tax that.
Okay, thank you.
I think this is about to be our last question, given the time. It's very sorry for folks who can't get there, but come on up.
So my question is in a way related to Chris's shirt. So sort of 3-part question about tax increment financing. 1, just explain how it works, and 2, how specifically the assessor's office is involved in it. And then 3, do you think we should do more of it?
Tax increment financing. Can you expand on it a little bit for me?
The general gist of it is that your bonding capacity of today will be based on the land value increases caused by whatever you're spending that bond money on.
Understood. So, again, relative to the purview of the Department of Assessments, this is related but not directly under the realm of what we would be dealing with on a regular basis. So I apologize for that caveat, because that's not a very fun answer. Yeah, I don't know if I have much to say on it. I apologize.
This is more of a city issue, and because the city is the entity that would be collecting revenues from those projects within the TIF zone, and so the city would be bonding against the potential, the sources of revenue coming from that, and it would not come. It would be usually it would be a general purpose bond that the city has, and is responsible for, not the taxpayers. So instead of a bond for like a pool or something like that, which is spread out, a capital bond that's spread out across every property owner and specifically levied for that purpose, a TIF bond is a general purpose bond held by the city, and the city as a whole is responsible for it, but not individual property owners.
Thank you so much, audience members, for your questions. Thank you so much for the candidates for coming and answering our questions today. And we are going to have a brief 8 to 10-ish minute intermission. as we wait for the District 2 candidates to arrive and get settled in. And we'll sort of take our seats again then. Thank you so much, everyone.
Oh, wait.
Yeah, if folks can take their seats, we're gonna get started in 1 second. It's okay, I don't need to be in the live stream, I'm not very important here. I will hand things off, I think pretty immediately to Crystal here.
Hello, everyone. We are going to get started with the King County Council District 2 candidates. We have Toshiko Hasagawa and Rebecca Saldana here with us. We're excited to go through these questions. I mentioned this earlier, I'm going to mention it again because it's a big deal. One change I want everybody to be aware of and to spread the word to all of your family and friends is a change in the U.S. Post Office postmark requirements that impacts the way that we need to vote. No longer does the post office guarantee that the day you hand in a piece of mail, like a ballot, will be the day it gets postmarked. Our mail-in balloting system requires that your ballot be postmarked by election day. So that pushes the time that you need to mail in a ballot, if you're gonna do that, up further. We love ballot drop boxes. We encourage everybody to use ballot drop boxes. If you're going to mail it, do it at least a week before the election. Our primary election is on Tuesday, August 4th. So a week before that, mail it. If you're within a week of the election day, put it in a drop box. Talk to people you know, tell them to put it in a drop box. Don't wait until late to mail because there's no guarantee it will just get postmarked by election day, meaning there's no guarantee that that ballot will count, and we want to avoid that. Every vote counts. So very important change. Please spread the word. But for now, we're going to get into these questions. So starting off, we'll start with Toshiko. Can you please introduce yourself and briefly describe how your experience lends itself to this role?
Thank you so much, Crystal, and good evening, everybody, and thank you so much to our co-hosts that have brought us all here together today. My name is Toshiko Grace Hasagawa. I use she, her pronouns. I am a 4th generation District 2 resident, and I actually live right here in Beacon Hill. So a little bit about me is this is the neighborhood where my grandparents set down roots when they were released from American concentration camps. This is the place where they built their life, where they raised my father and his siblings. It's where he raised my sister and I, and now I'm the mom. I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, and they both attend school right here at El Centro De La Raza. Is that me grumbling like that? Yes.
There's like a phantom noise in the back of the room. I don't know where it's coming from, but it's interesting.
We'll try what the senator's suggesting. She said she'll turn off her mic, and we'll make sure we turn off our mics for each other. That sounds a little bit better, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okie dokie. Great troubleshooting. Thank you. So this is where my kids go to school, and it's actually the same place where their grandfather went to school once upon a time as well. And so, but now I pay $54,000 a year in childcare. And that's just one representation of how affordability is crushing everyday people. This is our friendly neighborhood center. We have seen across generations how folks have struggled to maintain their roots in the places that they love and they call home. And so I'm really proud of my experience in the public sector, 6 years at the state of Washington as the state's top official on Asian Pacific American affairs, connecting historically marginalized communities to urgent resources during crises. I'm proud of my 4.5 years at the Port of Seattle Commission, leading the economic engine of this region. And I believe that the culmination of my experiences are exactly what equipped me to be able to step into this incredibly important role at a moment of great need, but also great opportunity. We have before us lots and lots of change with the new county executive, with the new mayor, with the new governor. And I am so proud to bring my deep roots, my expertise in economic development, workforce development, and in building public infrastructure for public benefit in perpetuity to help King County step into its power as a force for public development of public goods for public benefit in perpetuity. And that looks like housing. That looks like affordable housing and social housing. It looks like workforce housing. It looks like expanded shelter space. And it looks like being creative and using all of our different tools to make sure that we are making sure that we're not just building that, but it's happening in concert with our other urgent needs, such as childcare and food security access. Because if we build intentionally, if we do that around in transit-oriented development, then we can make sure that we're not just addressing affordability, but also accessibility, right, and availability needs that are all happening at the same time. So I think that this is the perfect place for us to be having this conversation, one of the best representations of transit-oriented development done right, and I sincerely look forward to a robust conversation.
Rebecca? Okay, please introduce yourself and briefly describe how your experience lends itself to this role.
Let's see if this one works as well, this phone, or this microphone. Does it work now? Did I eat it?
Yeah.
Is that better?
Yeah, I think we may have to eat it.
Okay. All right. Okay. So my name is Rebecca Saldana, and I am really excited to run for King County Council. What I'm about is building housing, affordable at all income levels, making sure that we're raising wages and standards for our communities, and building transit and improving the system overall. What I bring to this is a lifetime of organizing on these issues and really demonstrating that it's really about changing culture, changing context so that we can do hard things together. What I'll talk about is both of us have amazing dads and have amazing moms as well. But my dad's experience as an undocumented immigrant, growing up in southern segregated Texas, picking cotton, and then after the harvest being sent back to Mexico, feeling a lot of rage, and really it wasn't until he came up here following the crops in Oregon that he had an opportunity to feel like he was treated as a human being. It was eventually a job, a factory job, a union job in Georgetown, which as an adult I've come to learn, right, is a Superfund zone. It's a place where his factory is one of the most polluting, but it also was recycling glass. And it is how we first learned about the importance of conservation, and it was what allowed us to have a strong foundation, not just for my immediate nuclear family, but also for all of our family and our community. My dad was the baseball coach, and he provided, and because of him, I was able to play sports and have health care and have a good education. But as a student at Seattle University, I helped found the MECHA chapter, and actually got involved with the Centro at that time, and really began to understand the systems, that even though my family was doing well, I met farm workers in Eastern Washington and Oregon that were living the same life my dad did just decades later. And understanding that systems and policies need to change. So I studied theology, and it made me a union organizer. I worked with the farm workers and the janitors, and then when I felt a little burnt out, I went for Congressman Jim McDermott, but I was doing casework for him on labor and climate and environment and housing and veterans care, and that's when we were really trying to bring all veterans under housing. Fort Lawton, at that time, was the vision to put housing there, and it is an absolute sin that it's now almost 25 years later, and there's still not housing at that site. And it's because we have great policies, like the Growth Management Act and SEPA, that's supposed to be about making sure that we are building sustainably, that we're taking into account our tribal interests and our sovereign nations, that we are building in a way that is creating inclusive opportunities for everyone, and instead what is happening is that it's being co-opted by white supremacist thinking that believes that only a few people should be able to have the house that they want, and that the rest of us can live on the streets. And that is just unacceptable. I mean, that's why after working for Jim McDermott during the recession and seeing that, again, not all people are treated equally when there are catastrophes. And so I was doing a lot of casework for Black and brown folks that were losing their homes because they were sold bad loans on top of the redlining redlining. And so that is what sent me back to Puget Sound Stage, where we worked at this intersection, and that eventually sent me to Olympia, where for the last decade, there was not a housing priority when I first got there, and so I helped create the housing committee to be able to really focus the Senate and being a champion for housing. We created historic investments in housing. We put climate justice as a priority to make sure that as we're building out, we're thinking about communities that have been historically burdened. And to my good competitors, our port commissioners, what she mentioned is that this is the perfect place because this is a place where community took land and said, we're gonna put it to good use. And they were able to leverage and negotiate with Sound Transit to be able to get the parking lot to be something that they're paying the community to use, so that then they had the money to be able to develop this amazing place that we're in that is providing affordable housing. It allowed people that were losing their homes in Tifloa, that were living in trailers, instead of being out in the streets, some of them were able to move here. People that have been here for generations have been able to stay here. And we have small businesses here, we have our senior programming, but this was not by accident. It's because community said we need to be at the center of how we build, that it shouldn't just be the big developers that are benefiting, but our actual communities. And it's because I've been organizing with these communities at this moment when we're facing tough budget cuts, when we're facing a Trump administration attacking our communities. This is why I think my leadership is needed right now, and why I am running for King County Council.
All right, now we're gonna get into a couple of quick questions here, a few quick questions. So starting with Rebecca, we'll just go back and forth. What mode of transportation, what mode or modes of transportation did you use to get to this event?
My electric car.
And Toshka?
I biked.
Do you own or rent the home you live in?
I own it.
I also own it. Well, the bank owns it, but I pay regular.
Do you own any residential rental properties?
No.
No.
Do you own any vacation or second homes? Go ahead, Rebecca.
No.
No.
All right, so now we're gonna get into zoning and permitting questions. So we're gonna try and keep these pretty focused here. So we have a number of things to get through, hopefully. So King County has seen consistently rising housing prices. Before we get into how you plan to address the issue, so this isn't about the plans, what do you believe is the causes of the housing crisis? And do zoning restrictions and permitting delays play a significant part in housing and rental affordability? Go ahead, Rebecca.
So first of all, the causes, right, is decades of underbuilding at every level of affordability and not having a plan. Exclusionary zoning and restricted land use, like the single family homes, policy, the zoning. What we've seen, of course, is rising construction, and right now, of course, the tariffs. But really also, it's about the historic redlining and discriminatory housing policies that were in place. It's this insufficient investment in affordable housing. It was deciding to build luxury condos where there had been single residency housing without making a plan for where the folks were gonna go. And it is, the federal government actually putting an amendment in place that actually makes it impossible for our Seattle and King County housing authorities to actually be able to build more units. They were tied to be able to, and forced to have to build only within their own frame. So when Yesler Terrace was developed as a Hope 6 project, the best we got was one-for-one replacement, which we knew did not account for growth. Those are just a few of the things that are some of the causes.
Thank you. Toshka?
I agree. I think that a huge part of the problem has been a long legacy of not building enough while we have seen tremendous growth come to this region. I think it is zoning policies that have made it so that there's only single family homes that are even allowed to build unless we have special exceptions or are gonna change that. I do think that it's exclusionary and generations of racist policies. We are in a historically redlined neighborhood right now. District 2 is home and represents historically redlined neighborhoods, and so it's really important that we talk about that. There's the history of exclusionary covenants as well. In fact, King County, under Executive Zahalai and then Council Member Zahalai's leadership, issued a study that identified that the tune of $3 billion had been robbed of the Black community specifically through its racist policies. These are historical wrongs. These are historical wrongs that have led to tangible outcomes today. So when we're talking about issues of housing right now, we have to recognize that it's not on accident. It's by design, and these are wrongs that need to be addressed. That's why I'm very proud to have rolled out a comprehensive housing platform in consultation with community members who've worked in affordable housing spaces, with developers who are identifying what the issues are with permitting. Excuse me. And it begins with anti-displacement.
Remember, we're not talking about the solutions yet, but just.
Oh, okay. And well, then I do want to say that permitting is a huge piece about this as well. It takes too long right now for permits to even get approved. It could take up to 5 months. And I will tell you, as somebody who does public development, that there is a cost to delay. That's what we call the soft cost in construction. There's also the ongoing, and we have the second trade war with our greatest trade partner that does facilitate the flow of some of the raw materials that we need to be able to build here. We're seeing that factor into our inflationary prices. We're doing what we can to be able to compete at the port, to be able to bring down those prices. But there are so many different things that are happening in tandem. There is the failure in the past that we need to address. The other thing that I'll say is the sense of urgency that we need to bring to this is knowing what's coming. The PSRC projects that we're gonna grow in this region by another 1 million people by 2035, which means that the urgency and the time for bold action is right now.
Thank you. All right, next question, and we'll start with Tushko. King County Council members have zoning authority only in unincorporated areas of the county, which include resource lands, forests, and wilderness areas. How would you balance the need for housing with the need to protect the environment and natural resource lands?
The simple answer for that is density. There's growth and then there's sprawl, and sprawl is the enemy. And at the Port of Seattle, we are very well practiced in doing the best that we can to go up and not out, and do that in the most sustainable way possible. Just today, we celebrated the grand opening of a renovated Concourse C expansion. This was the first project that I got to oversee from top to bottom, make sure that it was staying on time, on budget, and it is going to be the Port of Seattle's first platinum certified LEED program. It is absolutely within King County's reach to be able to do new development, and we can rezone within historically, not just in unincorporated areas. So in D2, the unincorporated areas are Skyway, West Hill, and these are areas where they have also been historically zoned for single family housing. And so this is a place where King County actually has direct oversight and control to be able to change that. And these are all things that will have tangential benefits as well of creating access to roads that are not yet optimized. We need to talk about our transportation system and how that's gonna flow in with the new build that we're gonna do there. But we have seen what it looks like when communities are demanding control and self-determinance over the way that they want to shape their communities. And so we have an example in Africatown of a very successful community land trust model. I have gone to Skyway, I have listened to what people are asking for. They want a community land trust. We should give it to them. And we should give developers incentives that if they're going to achieve a certain amount of density, then they will get some sort of an incentive. Or if they're going to do a large structure, they want to put childcare at the bottom of it, then they can get an incentive. I think we have a lot of opportunities to think really creatively about how we can specifically resource unincorporated areas who have been historically underserved.
Thank you. Rebecca?
So the question is about zoning authority in unincorporated areas, and how we balance that. So just making sure.
Yep, how do you balance the need for housing with the need to protect the environment and natural resource lands?
So maybe this is the first place where we partner with our tribes, and with the communities and the rural communities, making sure that what we're thinking about is how are we developing both green landscape and ecosystems that will be resilient homes, as well as making sure that we are building density. And so how we do that is by focusing on our urban growth boundaries. And so Skyway and West Hill are great opportunities, White Center as well. These are places where we have some great projects that I've already been working on. And so I'll give an example. This is where equitable transit-oriented development is a priority. We've done this at the city level. I worked with advocates at the state level to make sure that we have EDI at the county level as well. But we already have Land Trust, and the Skyway Coalition has worked with our district and with the county to be able to identify land at scale. So this is not one by one. This is looking at where can we actually build scale. And so one project is a partnership with Skyway, with the Community Homeland Trust, and King County and the state. And so we have, the state just put in the last amount of money that was part of our local advocacy of the capital budget. And so it's gonna be 11 acres of ecosystem along with over 50 home ownership opportunities. It is partnering with private and nonprofit developments all along our area, looking how we are with the Sound Transit 3 that we advocated for to have the 80-20-20. So this is about building affordable housing. It's about making sure that we leverage already what we have as our early learning facilities. So it's already incentivized for projects to include childcare, to have senior housing, cultural centers. That's actually what helps anchor our communities so that they can leverage the transit and they'll bring in more affordability. And so, I mean, it is very true, the way that we save dollars, especially as we're looking at roads and transportation and how expensive it is making sure that we're leveraging the current right-of-ways and roads that we have. So the more that we're putting housing along our bus rapid transit and light rail, that means we don't have to invest as much in the rural roads. Trying to think if there's anything else that we can build on the good work that Doshi Gaseo was speaking to. But I think really it's so often that we have housing and environment seen as pitting against each other, but if we're actually building resiliency and thinking about environmental justice, we end up with win-wins. And that's why affordable housing is a climate solution.
Now we'll start with Rebecca here. Now, some unincorporated communities in King County face high displacement risk and a lack of infrastructure investment such as Skyway and White Center. What would you do to address these issues, and can these areas grow without displacement? If so, what's the path to do so?
We can absolutely grow without displacement. That has been the theme of Puget Sound Stage, and it is what we have been working and organizing with. How we do that is by centering the communities most impacted, by bringing in our Black legacy homeowners to be at the table shaping what the future looks like, and making sure that we are grounding our elders in their communities and allowing them to age in place while creating new opportunities for young professionals and folks that are just trying to get by, to be able to find a place to live and grow in our communities. So we have 1 million projects along the light rail right now where community has led. So Toshiko already spoke about Africatown and the Trust. I worked with them in 2020 when they had their big and bold ideas about partnering with communities to be able to provide that development. I was there for the Midtown groundbreaking and for Liberty Bank. We have helped them partner with the projects all along light rail, and it is just driving here today, seeing Estelitas, which is a project, again, and this goes to another thing that we have identified as a need and a way that we can solve and address the housing crisis. So a lot of the projects that we see in little zones where property is underutilized right now, it's often because it is contaminated. And so we've worked with Department of Ecology, and Mount Baker Housing was one of the first ones to pioneer what it was to do healthy environmental housing. So we actually provide grants and partner with folks to do the remediation so that it's not just on the developer, because this is a big problem for affordability, is that so much requires of doing the siting, the permitting, the hazard mitigation, that you can spend over $100,000 easily on just building an ADU or diet garu, if you have to take all that into account. And so that program is one program that we have scaled and invested in with our capital dollars over the years, and it's why Estelitas is able to now be in a place where they're gonna build affordable housing, a permanent home for their library, and be an anchor here in our community. So these are the things that that we're being able to leverage and scale at the county level, is looking where we can help and be partners to be able to make sure that we're cutting costs down so that the communities and developers are able to partner well together and actually build more housing and the amenities that really make living possible.
Joshua?
As I mentioned before, the outcomes that we're seeing happens by design. And the question is not about what have you done or not how will you approach this, it's what will you do to make sure that as we grow, because we will grow, what will you do to make sure that there is not displacement? What will you do to make sure that people who have built this community, who are arriving here for refuge because they're facing hate, discrimination across the nation, people who love this community and call it home can actually afford to live here? Which is why my housing platform that has been built in consultation with community and we rolled out with community members standing behind us begins with anti-displacement. And that looks like a right to return policy for people who have had roots here, but we know that they were ripped out. And a right to return policy is so important because the Black community over the last 10 years, things have gotten worse. I told you that it cost me $54,000 a year to pay for childcare for 2 children right here at El Centro, but the average median income for the Black family in District 2 right now is about $75,000 a year. So you can see how people are making decisions out of economic imperative. This is folks are departing the workforce because it doesn't math to be able to go to work and put your kids in childcare. These are systemic failures, and we know how stabilizing having an anchor, having a home can be. And so the Black community has been prescriptive about what it wants to see, and that looks like reparative investments. And reparative investments would look like programs and pathways such as the federal government has as a voucher to home ownership program. I would love to see that adopted at the county level. Or a rent-to-own pilot program. We have so many people who are looking to find their way back into these communities that they love with no pathway to actually accessing home ownership. And we're gonna be building new affordable housing or social housing units, give it a place where they can't just rent, but they can own. And that's meaningful and that's transformational. Yes, to more community land trusts, that people are self-determinant about how their communities are going to look and how they're going to function. And Mamdani pointed out to us the statistic that when people have access to legal services, it prevents them being evicted to the tune of 30%. That's why we have to make sure a stay housed guarantee is in place at King County. That means if you are facing imminent eviction, and all of us know how hard it is when you're doing the math at the end of the month and you're not really sure how it's gonna pan out once the first comes around, that if you're facing imminent eviction, that you could access one-time stabilization fees or assistance. We have amazing programs that already exist through, for example, United Way, that do rent stability for folks, access to legal counsel, but we also need to make sure that I am interested for folks who are actually in the position where they can put down a down payment to buy a home, what if we had a property tax exemption, a new property tax exemption for those people, right? So that they can find their footing. Because one thing that I've learned at the port, working on the economy, trying to bring stability, is that the number one enemy of thriving, whether it's in your home, your life, or in your business, is uncertainty. So to the degree that we can be that stabilizing factor at the county, I think we can, and I think that we should. And I think that that would go a long way for our communities who deserve to call this place home.
Thank you. Now,
Clap for that, it's okay.
well, we're actually going to try and limit the clapping a little bit, just because we have a lot to get through, even though you both are great, you both deserve a lot of claps. But we'll hold them until the end at least. In 2022, the county adopted inclusionary zoning regulations for Skyway West Hill and North High Line, which included mandatory inclusionary housing in the commercial cores of both communities and voluntary inclusionary housing in the remaining areas of those communities. The comprehensive plan update passed last year contemplates expanding the program to more areas and directs the executive to issue a report by the end of 2027, reviewing the program and considering expansion to more areas. So there are really two questions here. What are your metrics for success for the county's inclusionary housing program? And do you support expanding inclusionary requirements to more unincorporated areas? We'll start with Rebecca. Working?
Okay, so the metrics for success for inclusionary housing is making sure that we have an increase in the family size units and actually meeting the need of the people that are living in that neighborhood to be able to actually access that housing and have it meet their needs. The number of affordable housing overall, geographic distribution and access to transit, and the impact on displacement, long-term affordability, and actually meet the community's neighborhood vision and needs. Inclusionary housing really is about making sure that we have integrated communities where it's a place where a young person can get an apartment, that's also a place where an elder can actually downsize and still remain in their communities. This is the goal of inclusionary housing, and it's something that we've pushed for at the state level and at the local level, but really it's about it doesn't actually achieve its goal if we don't have community being able to shape that development and own that development. And so that's where really I think that the leveraging our social housing, leveraging our community land trusts and our sweat equity. And I'll say like the other piece that is important as we're thinking about inclusionary housing is the fact that at the state level, with Frank Chop and Representative Jamila Taylor, we passed the Covenant Homeownership Initiative, and we just celebrated this last Friday the Young Black Homeownership Center that just is at the McKinney Center, which is something that we work with community in the Central District on to make sure that Black leadership, ownership, entrepreneurship, and homeownership are ones that can happen in Central District, that the people do have the right to return, and that inclusionary housing is one of the tools, but it's not the only tool alone that will achieve the outcomes we're looking for.
Toshka?
You know, when it comes to Skyway, again, this is the place where King County in unincorporated areas where it has direct control. And so simply, I want to see the metrics of success, being how many units did you put up? What's the vacancy rate? Making sure that we're actually pairing that with placement for people. And making sure that nobody's been actively displaced out of Skyway who identifies as that being their home.
Thank you. So now we're going to move on and talk about Growth Management Act. First question, we'll start with Toshiko. Given the increasing demand for more housing across King County, how do you approach balancing the need for housing with concern about sprawl?
Again, density is going to be our best friend here. when you are sprawling, my opponent did talk about the expanding the boundary, but I really believe that we need to do the most with the tools that we already have. We want to be able to maintain our precious green spaces. These are a valuable community asset, particularly in a high-risk community that has experienced environmental injustice like Skyway. We care so deeply about the trees. At the Port of Seattle, I will tell you that there is significant labor that goes into consulting with communities about how those trees will be managed. And I do understand that there are gonna be a very, very strong pull to be able to develop as much as we can. Let's do that with the resources that we have. Let's make it as dense and as sustainable as we possibly can, because that development has to happen in cognition with our SCAP goals. Those SCAP goals are the way King County is going to turn the dial on decarbonization. We think about the transportation sector as being the primary emitter of greenhouse gas emissions, but buildings do it too. At the port, we have proven that you can build well and you can actually actively reduce your greenhouse gas emissions the more that you build. The other thing is, we all need to see how this connects into an opportunity for our community members like Skyway, and in Skyway, who are experiencing higher unemployment, higher high school dropout rates, higher gun violence, higher exposure to interfacing with the criminal legal system, being over-policed, over-representation of Black boys and men in our jail system at King County. Empower them by connecting them to a green job. This is something that we've done at the port, so I know it's possible at King County. It looks like connecting them with jobs in green energy. It looks like connecting them jobs in the building trades, and this is where labor partners need to see themselves as active pieces of the solution. Historically, King County has not stepped into its power as an economic development entity. This is the opportunity that housing presents us. So I want to see us be a really thoughtful, proactive partner on how we can not just build in places like Skyway, but connect that to the opportunities that are going to break the cycles, not just of homelessness and poverty, but also of crime. And that stability will lead to better outcomes for mental health as well.
Rebecca?
Okay. This is about density.
Growth management act. Yes.
Yeah. The increasing demand for more housing, given the increasing demand for more housing across King County, how do you approach balancing the need for housing with concern about sprawl?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is a place of agreement. Building homes near jobs, stores, transit, childcare, is the best use of our public dollars. And there was a few study done recently that just affirms this. How we build and where we build needs to be sustainable. I think I had the opportunity to go with the House Our Neighbors, and really proud that they actually have been very engaged in setting up our platform, which is on our website, and has been also that a community that are directly impacted, that work in the space of housing and transit have been shaping that policy. So happy to have people take a look at that. But I think that the piece is, when I went to Vienna on this tour, what I saw was not just the social housing and how we leverage the developers that we have right now to be able to leverage our public lands and prepare it for the development that actually allows for the kind of thriving communities where people can access their amenities, be able to stay and live in that healthy place. But it also, as they're also building more green spaces and making our green spaces more resilient, whether that is urban farming, whether that is good salmon, salmon habitat, and so I think that piece is really important. As I've served as the Vice Chair of Transportation, we were looking at how do we create good jobs. Was part of shaping the apprenticeship pathways for our building trades, and it's part of why I'm really proud to have their endorsement, is that there are ways to make sure that all jobs are green jobs, that we're building that transition, that we're building affordable housing in a way that allows for young people to be able to see a future where they can actually be making their communities better and not just working for corporate extraction, which is often how a lot of young people are being pushed. That the way to go forward is to work for one of these big companies that are, part of the problem for the oil addictions that we're seeing around our globe. So I think in terms of growth management, again, this is a place where we need to partner with our communities. Skyway has been a leader. White Center CDA has been a leader in shaping what the right kind of development looks like that actually supports our small businesses to anchor and be successful. Was there another part to that question? Is this the comfort zone?
I think that covers it.
Thanks.
And so this, we'll start with you, Rebecca. Hopefully this is a quicker answer from both of you here. Would you, I'm not saying that. Would you support or oppose expanding the urban growth boundary, and if so, where?
My plan is not to expand the urban growth. This is actually a place where, as an environmentalist, I do not believe we need to expand. I think we need to look, especially at King County and with some of our cities, how we're partnering with them to focus on density. I know that there's one school right on the edge that has been advocating, to be able to build there, but I'm not right now thinking that that's the right solution.
Toshiko?
No, not at this time.
This. All right, next question. We'll start with you, Toshiko. The county is required to plan for unincorporated areas inside the urban growth boundary to be annexed into cities under the Growth Management Act. In recent years, annexations of these areas slowed to a near stop, with cities citing the cost of providing services outweighing the tax revenues generated by these areas. How would you think about planning for these annexations countywide and in Bryn Mawr Skyway specifically? What policy changes do you think are needed at the state, county, or city level to ease the annexation process?
So, it's just a cost trap. And, but I do want to lift up that I think that Skyway has the right to vote as to whether or not to be annexed as well. In fact, it did vote, and they voted against it. And so I support Skyway's ability to be self-determinate. And I believe that we have a lot of organizing to do to build more equitable structures that are gonna better serve the people of Skyway, who are facing a lot of affordability squeezes. And if you go to Skyway, you ask them who they're gonna vote for, they say whoever solves my water bill. And the reason is because they are charged at the exact same rate as everybody else living properly within the city of Seattle, but that cost is divided upon a fraction of the number of people. So it's 4 times the size of our water bill. And so one policy that we could do at King County to be able to meaningfully serve people in the meantime is pool the utility services across all unincorporated areas so it's more equitably distributed in terms of cost. Otherwise, in terms of planning for annexation, I think that maybe we could pursue funding from the state to be able to support transition services. But in the meantime, it's not penciling out for the cities, and we cannot force them to annex.
Rebecca?
Well, I think this is a place where we need to partner with our region as a whole. So the city of Seattle, Renton, primarily are the two, right, that Burien, where we need to partner with our communities and with the folks that live in our unincorporated areas to really talk through what are the pros and the cons. How do we make sure that the level of service is meeting their needs and really being clear about taxation. This is a place where, why I'm really proud that we have passed the capital gains tax and the millionaire's tax, is because we need progressive revenues, and the county is in a position where they do not have a lot of tools. City of Seattle has those tools, and that's why we have the social housing policy, right? But I think I'll give one very tiny specific example in my neighborhood where we have the Dead Horse Canyon. It's a park that we had 100 trees that were going to be up for being cut down because Seattle Public Utilities needed to do work because there was, but the work was gonna solve one problem, but it wasn't actually going upstream in Skyway, where the problem was actually, where the root problem was. And so, you know, it was one of the things that, as a county council member and as a state senator, was saying, I forced them to come together and say, you cannot propose cutting these trees down if you haven't even coordinated with each other. So I think there's a way that we can make sure that we are doing a better job of getting coordination across all of the utilities, the services, of like, how do we make sure this pencils? So regardless of whether it's the county or the state or the city, we're getting the job done. And I think as we have conversations with homeowners and as we're building, I think there's some opportunities for us, again, once that millionaire's tax, you have to defend it, you have to win it, but then it does really open up doors for us to work with the state to come up with that transition. And I'm the one with a decade of experience of building deep relationships with the current legislators there that are the decision makers. And I have been, and so I think that's why it's really important as we're thinking about annexation and costs and services, where the state has to be such a big player, having someone that has legislated, that has stood up to big corporate interests like the master builders, like realtors, like landowners and landlords, to be able to say, you know, we're gonna prioritize affordability, we're gonna prioritize climate, we're gonna prioritize making sure that we deliver for the residents of Washington, not just the big corporate interests. And I'm in a position and have a history to actually demonstrate that I can do that for the county and help us be successful and partnering with the state.
Toshiko, if you're in office during the King County 2029 mid-cycle comprehensive plan update, what zoning changes will you propose?
Add housing capacity and make sure that there's guardrails in place to prevent displacement.
Rebecca? Yep, if you're in office during the King County 2029 mid-cycle comprehensive plan update, what zoning changes will you propose?
Okay, I actually have this. I mean, I think the zoning, sorry.
And just as a reminder to people, we sent these questions to, the majority of these questions to the candidates beforehand.
Well, my notes are all big mess.
But sometimes that makes planning a
That makes it
little
even harder.
complicated.
So, I mean, on zoning, I mean, I think part of it is, at the state level, we said we need to actually have real solutions on housing. And so I think as we're looking at the zoning that we're gonna do, is making sure that we have the zoning set up to actually build the housing that we need at the scale that we need it to be. And so I think that's the place where I'd be really focusing. The other piece that we work with communities, actually making sure that we're doing an overlay of equity and climate. And so I do think there's opportunities at that midpoint to make actually, how as the region and as the county, are we leading and championing those elements to make sure that we're not just building housing that can't get insured because it's in a floodplain, but that we're actually building resiliency, using passive housing, using the tools that we know about being able to make it something that's housing that's good now, and also as we face the changing climate.
Now, we'll start with Toshiko. Former District 2 County Council member, now executive, Zahalai, spearheaded a study to create a $1 billion bond financing program for workforce housing, effectively social housing for King County. This study found that in the first 5 years, the county would need an additional $30 million a year in tax revenue to support the program. Would you pursue the creation of the program, and what policy changes would you seek at the county and state level to facilitate its success?
I absolutely would pursue this program. And so here's the thing, is that we actually do have tools for us to be able to increase our bonding capacity. Right now, under RCW, King County has legal authority to set up a PDA, a Public Development Authority. And this is an entity where we could put funds to be able to do economic development specifically. And so he's talking about a levy. We would support a levy. That's a place where we could put some of the funding dollars there. I support land banking. I support we have a ton of properties in our portfolio that typically go to like an auction, but we could liquidate one of those and put that into a PDA, but that's something that we could bond against, right? But let's all just take a moment here, because Prop 1A proved that it can be done. It has exceeded expectations, right? And we just celebrated the first opening of a social housing complex down over by Pike Place Market. And I would love to see us go to the state legislature or explore the additional taxing authority for something like a modified B&O tax, right? Where it could be assessed on revenues instead of on profits instead of on revenues, so that it's a little bit more progressive, and have that seed these housing projects that need to come, all kinds of housing projects that need to come. And you know, I do believe that, you know, the governor has signed House Bill 2442, and I think that we should explore all of the alternative new taxing opportunities that are now going to be available to state government or to local governments. And so, you know, I believe that we need to act with urgency. And a lot of these funding mechanisms that we identify now, we do recognize their regressive nature. However, I've seen the people of this district time and again raise their hand and say that when it's for a worthy cause, that they're willing to pay their taxes for that. And so I would support this, and I think that there are ways that we can see it through.
Rebecca?
Yeah, so I mean, that report did say that it was gonna cost $30 million a year in dedicated funding, which unfortunately, because the King County really relies on only property tax and sales tax, we don't have a pathway like we did at the City of Seattle. You know, we're blessed to live in the City of Seattle, where we did hit the head tax on, and that's why it's doing so well. And so that's a really important. If we're going to do this, we need a progressive revenue. The piece that I'll say is this is why we passed the millionaire's tax, because the benefit of the millionaire's tax is that it also, when we start collecting on it, will make our state capital budget much more robust and allow the state to be a better partner with us in doing this, and so thinking more about a state level PDA that will allow us to do the land banking, that will allow us to do the pre-development and get things set up so that we can scale housing across our region. Because right now, the challenge with King County when we do this is that we will have to partner with our 39 cities, because it is really only in our unincorporated areas where we have that, and so much of that is governed by the GMA. What we can do though is take this idea and really leverage the current City of Seattle social housing and look at where we can partner with them, along with what we can do as a state and as a county is partner with our current King County Housing Authority and our Renton Housing Authority and our Seattle Housing Authority that already have a lot of this built in about how do they land bank, how are they able to, they have real estate firms, they know how to manage land. It is a place where we can actually double down in the importance of public-owned housing and social housing that can be affordable and much more flexible than just relying only on the private market, and make sure that private market are good partners with us, that they are going to be better partners with us when we're driving the development and that we're setting what what the options are for the social housing. So I like the idea, but I'm very reticent of supporting it because county does not have the taxing authority to be able to make it real.
Thank you. We'll start with you again for this question, Rebecca. The most recently released King County Housing Authority data book from 2023 analyzes the causes that lead to residents exiting the King County Housing Authority system. For context, about 5% of people in the King County Housing Authority system leave the system each year. Most recently, 13.5% of them exited were for what KCHA categorizes as positive reasons, like income increases above the eligibility threshold, they moved to the private market, good things, we want to see those. In contrast, 29% of exits are negative, with the most common cause being a paperwork violation. The remaining majority, or 54%, were categorized as neutral or aging and health related. How can the county increase the positive exit rate of public housing residents?
Well, first of all, we have to build more housing. Because people aren't exiting the system because there's no place to go that's affordable. And we have, people that should be able to afford housing, having to rent because they have major debt, they have healthcare issues. And so that's the biggest thing, is we have to actually go back to the original and build more housing. So that's a big piece of it. I think the other is so increasing the positive exits, I think we have to do that, and also we have to create more opportunities for living wages, and being able to, as we were talking about, building universal childcare, making sure that healthcare is more affordable so that they actually have more income. But we have a lot of that right now is cliffs, and so that's a piece of it. And then I think, but to your point, even if it's 5%, even if it's around 25% of that 5%, no one should be pushed out of public housing because of administrative, problems and barriers. At the state level, I'm really proud that we have sponsored and allowed the right to counsel. We have to make sure that at the county level, everyone has access to that right to counsel, because we have a bigger workload. And so I think what I would set is really the zero, making sure that we have a goal of zero, in terms of people that are leaving for negative reasons, and really looking at how we're creating economic opportunity for people to be able to exit for positive reasons.
Toshika?
The data says that 1/3 of the people in the system exit because of a negative reason, mostly because of a paperwork violation. A paperwork violation, that's a systemic failure. Because behind every single problem is paperwork. If you have ever been poor, then you know how it just gets harder. So we can't put people into a system and try and stabilize them and leave them to fend for themselves when they are facing compounding challenges. We're talking about vulnerable people who are struggling. And King County does systems level government. That's why people fall through the cracks. And unfortunately, we did roll back some progressive revenue sources at the state level, specifically the estate tax, which funds public defenders. And King County will have to face cuts. But right now, we have some really excellent public defenders who are called collateral consequences attorneys, who take people in and see the totality of what they're dealing with and advise them on all of that. Not just their case, but how to navigate the other systems that they're in as well. And we need more of that. Because we have to do more than stabilize people, we have to promote them along a continuum of care to a place where they end up being connected to opportunity and exiting because they're ready. Because they're ready. And when you're doing that, you're not just giving people services, you're creating pro-social, contributing members of society who are gonna be housed and stay housed and end up giving back. And that's a broader tax base. That's why my platform focuses, first and foremost, on criminal legal reform, because it's related. Because at King County, we spend 70% of our general fund on the legal system. 70% of our general fund on a system we could all agree is largely reactive and not getting the outcomes that we want. That's why I'm the only candidate in this race that was appointed by Executive Zahali to the transition team for breaking the cycle, because we see how these things are not siloed. We have to de-silo. I'm the only candidate that was appointed to Mayor Katie Wilson's transition team for workforce development, because that's how we break through and get better outcomes for all our community members. And I'm the only candidate in this race that was appointed to Governor Ferguson's transition team for economic development, because we have to see how the macro level is gonna connect down to the people on the ground in local government been doing this work. So that's how I see it, and the fact that it's paperwork violation, if we're going to seriously address it and get better outcomes, then we have to be thinking holistically.
Now I want to talk about the King County Regional Homelessness Authority. which has been in the news quite a bit recently. A recent audit of the KCHRA, found that $13 million was overspent and unaccounted for over the past 4 years. Public comments by the KCRHA CEO, Kelly Kinnison, said that there were clear signs that things were not functioning in the early days, and said that she was surprised by the surprise at the results of the audits. If you were on the council today, would you push to continue the interlocal agreement that established the KCRHA, restructure it, or terminate it, and why? We'll start with you, Toshiko.
I commend Council members Alexis Mercedes Rink and Dion Foster for demanding accountability. They want additional data. We're gonna see that data when it comes through on August 1st. And I also believe that the idea is right, that we need a regional and coordinated approach to be able to address the issues of homelessness. That premise was not wrong, and that premise should not be broken. However, if it were to be broken, then that means that we need to convene everybody so that we can identify exactly what didn't go wrong. Because from the county perspective, we can't force cities to come to the table, and we have to prove right now that we can get this right. And right now, we are very publicly proving that it just hasn't. So I don't think we give up on it, because it is doing really important work that it should be doing, specifically de-siloing among different entities, doing that one night count, the work that has to be done. And I would like to see it maintained. And if there's a way for us to be able to get to a place that we can do that, it will require very real accountability measures. And again, I think they were spot on for making sure that there's a hiring freeze, that there's bi-weekly reporting. I am baffled that $13 million is unaccounted for. It would never happen at the port, because financial compliance is just a piece of good governance. We've earned awards 20 years in a row for financial compliance, paired with a really robust auditing function, because that's how you do good governance. And so King County moving forward needs to be really thinking about how it is equipping folks, doing the hard work in their field of expertise with the technical skills that they need to be able to be compliant. I support transparency, and I support technical support and resources for folks to be able to do what needs to be done to support that.
Rebecca?
So, I mean, I agree actually with Gurmai Zakhalai as well, our executive, who's asking for the audits, who is working right now to make sure that we have accountability. And I agree that the regional strategy is the right strategy. We have got to get out of silos. But it's really clear that this was set up because our local governments were not working well together, and they did not make it regional. They did not actually give it the authority. And so I am with the person that said that she's surprised that people are surprised, because it was set up to fail. It was set up to be a scapegoat, because no one wants to do the hard work of actually recognizing that we need to bring people into shelter. At the state level, you know, what we've been working on is the real public safety, which is saying that we need to actually invest in diversion. That's why we passed the $200 million for Community Reinvestment Act, to actually provide legal counsel and defense for folks, to be able to invest in our small business entrepreneurship, to be able to address the historic harms of the war on drugs in our communities, and to be able to make sure that we're actually helping people not get in there in the first place. The investments we've made in the crisis centers and partnering to actually make sure that they get built so that we have diversion. I am the one that has been pushing for jail standards, because we're losing people's lives in our jails right now. And we're losing people on our streets. Because when they need care and when they're ready for care, with that's 1 a.m. or 3 a.m. in the morning, there is not a place for them to go. And so this is causing harm and making it harder for all of us. So I think what needs to happen is that we need to decide, are we ready to have a regional solution? And I'm hopeful that we can use this. I do think, and part of why I'm running for King County Council is because I was the only one that actually endorsed Katie Wilson, and I supported Gurmai on his race, because I believe in them, I believe in their vision, I want them to be successful. And so, in order for them to be successful,
You're not the only one who endorsed Kate Wilson.
before the primary?
Oh.
Elected.
Yeah, before the primary, yeah. And so that is, really important, is that we need to push, we need to be bold, and we need to organize. And so how we do that right now is actually making sure that we're having the conversations, that we're putting things in place, and it means what I would do is meet with the frontline workers that are doing the work, meet with the people on the streets that are being impacted, and making sure that their voices are part of shaping the accountability in the audits. When we look at the audit and we look at another audit, when we're looking at the strategies for diversion and really supporting our kids on the streets, what we learned is like, yes, there's some money that is not collected, and that is the problem. But most of it is because it was just not actually coded in the right way. And so those are things that can be fixed. They must be fixed. And what it relies is all of us that are serving on that would be serving on that, is actually doing the oversight, being accountable, and working with the communities when they were saying there's problems, and not delaying, so that we can actually bring people in.
So starting with you, Rebecca, if the authority does get dissolved, how should King County respond, and how do you get the participation of all of the cities in the county for whatever lies ahead?
So, this is a place where then really our executive and the council needs to step up. I think there are some ways. One is on the carrots, is looking at the state level. We've kind of pushed for our cities and our regions to have to deliver more housing, and we've pushed to make it so that single housing is not the default. To be able to make sure that we have 4-plex and 6-plex, and really leveraging our transit investments. So I think how we do that is look at where we're already doing well, and how can we lift up those strategies that are going well, whether it's a city that is doing really well on permitting, whether it's another that's doing well on shelters, and look at how can we as a county create the kind of the best practice, the playbook, to be able to leverage that. I think also we need to look at where are there places that we withhold investment if we don't have cities participate with us. And so that can look at roads and levees, like where we're actually investing. We need them to actually demonstrate that they're willing to do, either put money in or build part of the solutions for those shelters.
Toshka?
If it were to dissolve, it would be so disappointing that we are counting ourselves out of the opportunity to be able to come together in a coordinated fashion with the city. When there's so much overlay, this is one district that will deeply feel the impact of that. Because this is one of the only districts that coordinates with exactly one city. We are completely City of Seattle or unincorporated. And it's our communities where some of these disparities exist the most. Now, right now, we are hoping to receive federal funding. Our homelessness and shelter landscape is already precarious. And I would be really worried that we're putting a target on our backs saying, we have this community of care model that failed. And so I would be looking for how we need to protect ourselves from being targeted by the federal government. And I would be looking to see where those impacts in delays of service and in gaps of service, how those are gonna manifest and impact our community members. Right now, trans and queer community members who have made their home in District 2 are arriving at an unprecedented rate as refugees because they're being persecuted in their home states. And instead of finding belonging and shelter, they find homelessness. They're fired at a higher rate. They're the first to lose their jobs and they're the last people to be hired. The unemployment rate in the Black community is so high right now. And you have people departing the workforce out of economic dilemma because the math does not pencil out for care. We have a serious conundrum. Poverty is deep in this district specifically. And so we would need to have very, very close partnerships with community-based organizations who are doing the work. And we would need to make sure that we are pairing that with unrestricted funds to treat this as the emergency that it truly is, and we know what it looks like because we did it during COVID-19. So that those community-based organizations could provide the relief services in a culturally specific way to our impacted community members. And I would want to see shelter expansion for youth particularly, because these are all folks who are going to fall through the cracks. And then we need to bring everybody together, and we need to say what went wrong and then how are we going to rebuild so that we get it right. And like I said in my previous answer, because I thought you asked this in the last question, that it has to include really strong accountability measures.
Thank you. We'll start with you for this one. King County Metro is facing a fiscal cliff that you will inherit if you are elected. What would you support, or would you support finding new revenue, making cuts to service, or a combination to balance the budget?
Cuts to service is a very, very, very awful doom spiral. People depend on service. Remember the thing that I said about certainty and how destabilizing uncertainty is? We are home to some of the most transit-dependent people in the entire county. This is where the density is. This is where the jobs are. I don't care where you live, all road will eventually lead right here to Seattle. We need to make sure that we are maintaining service. Because when we eliminate service, we are exacerbating inequities. And that will happen at a compounding rate. Electrification is a very noble goal. It's one that I support, and it's one that I would want to chase down once we have a friendlier federal administration. But you have seen how they have categorically stripped all sustainability items and anything that involved the term environmental justice or equity from funding from the federal government, except for sustainable aviation fuels. And so until we know that we have better partnership, we have to make sure that we're taking care of our communities. King County is in the red. And we're being asked to do more with less tools because the state of Washington, we can celebrate that it passed the millionaire's tax. This is wonderful, and I hope that it withstands legal challenge, and I can't wait for it to be implemented. But in the meantime, it rolled back the estate tax. And it's not giving us the tools that we need to assess progressive taxation or have additional revenue generating opportunities for us to be able to answer and save ourselves. So, all's to say, thank you for the question. Sorry about that.
Rebecca?
Yeah, so, I mean, this is a place where I love transit. I love transportation policy. I didn't know I did until I came to work at Puget Sound Stage. Because this is the place, right away in our public right of ways is one of the things that we actually have power over, and making sure that how we use that right of way to be able to make lives better, to make sure that people can get home at the end of the day, to make sure that we're helping achieve our climate goals, our community benefits. And this is, you know, a place of actual real community power because it is owned by the public. So on King County Metro, this is a place where, you know, I wish we could be already making decisions about this because we're missing an opportunity. The county and the city should be doing a regional-wide transit levy that's popular, it's important, and aligning those up would be really ideal. That's not where we are, and we're not council members yet. And so I think what I want to see happen is that this is a place where in the recession, Metro was experiencing the very similar thing. Cuts were being made, they were saying it was about streamlining, and you know, it's the grandmas in Skyway and the kinship care providers and the youth of Rainier Beach that said, no, you can't cut my buses. And it was actually with the emerging fledgling Transit Riders Union that we partnered with them and others to push for the Prop 1, which was that city policy that allowed us to not only protect and defend against cuts, but to actually build. And because we know that how you get more riders and how you address, to your point, if we need to stall on some of the new buys, but keep our system going, it's really important because it addresses climate issues, it makes our livability better, it makes us less isolated when we're on our right-of-ways together. So how we solve the levy problem, I would pass a countywide levy, and so right now we're talking about roads, fine. It should be small, it should be very focused on our urban areas and actually improving safety, mobility, connectivity, that actually should not just be giving, cities, money. It should actually, they have to deliver and make sure that they're actually helping the overall system be better. But we know that transit levy is the right place to go. This is a place where it's really important with Move Ahead Washington to make sure the state was becoming a partner. Where for the first time we have grants that are going to local counties and to transit, so that is something that we continue to leverage, is make sure that we're taking every one of those dollars from the state and every one of those dollars from the feds to make sure that we're actually keeping things going. I would say, this is one last thing that I'll just mention, is that this is a place where we need to say that it's not about transit riders versus drivers versus industry. It actually saves industry so much more time if we can get more of those individual cars off the road and get us onto our buses. That allows our economy to move more smoothly. So there is a real benefit. So there's a way, I think the last thing I'd say is this is a place where I would talk with our businesses about the value of having a really robust transit system that is popular, so that they can move their goods more quickly, and if there's a value to that they're willing to pay.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Port Commissioner Hasagawa. Thank you, Senator Saldana, for entertaining our questions, for letting people know where you stand. I'm going to hand it off to Diego to close.
So we are going to close out. Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you again for the candidates. And we will be